Who do you look up to? Who do you look up to in sport? Who do you look up to in other areas of life, whether it's business or music or whatever? Who inspires you? Who makes you get out of bed and work harder at whatever it is you're trying to do, especially as this channel is dedicated to running, especially running. Like for me growing up, there was no social media back then. I don't want to make myself sound old, but there was no social media. So that we have a really easy access to our superstars. And if we want to follow whoever it is we're following right now, Cristiano Ronaldo, we're going to see his daily life. We're going to see what he eats, where he's going, what he's driving, everything to do with his life. And you can aspire to have that lifestyle as well as what he backs that up on the pitch. And he's one of the best players of all time. We get to see that. Back when I was a kid growing up, I didn't get to see that. So it was like, okay, when a sporting event comes around, when a race comes around, when a game comes around, I get to see that player and I get to see that what type of character they are. You know, my favorite characters in football, I was obsessed with football growing up. I was certain I was going to be a footballer from the age of 5 to 15. All I could think about was football all winter, and then I'd still play football in the summer, but I'd play cricket as well, and that was my life, and every other sport that could come with it. But I wanted to be like Roy Keane. I wanted to be like Paul Scholes. I wanted to be those Man United players that could, you know, pass the ball, but were very physical and were no nonsense. And then when I started to get more into an endurance standpoint, and my running idols were, you know, from the past, Steve Prefontaine, Don Ritchie, who maybe you've never heard of, but was a famous world record holder in the 100K, won many major 100Ks, including the El Paso Tour that was at a couple of years ago. Like went around Europe and won the biggest races in the world and beat the fastest runners in the world. Those were my inspirations, and I'm lucky enough to have read the book of Don Ritchie, and I can still see the footage of Steve Prefontaine, and I literally emulated when I was a kid his style when he was running around the track, the way that he kind of looked around the bend and saw his opposition, and the way that he was a front runner. But what really kind of came up, because cycling got so big in the 90s, what really came up for me was Lance Armstrong. Now it's a controversial figure because now we know what we know about Lance Armstrong, and now we know what was happening at the time. But why was he my idol, and why is he still my idol? Now Lance Armstrong, larger than life character, and was mega sport. He was super famous at the time. Like this is like 99 to 2007, he was winning the Tour de France. His mentality was they got to Europe and they saw that everybody was doing drugs. All the cyclists were doing drugs, and in order to compete, they were already the best in America. They were winning all the races in America, and they wanted to come to Europe, and they were miles away from winning races. And they were like, what the hell is going on? Are these different humans? And they found out that people were doping. And so they had a choice. And it's a sliding moment, and some people chose to listen. I want to go home, and I've already forfeited my education. They've already forfeited their everything that they could want to build a career in something else. The early 20s, late teens, they decided they had two options. They could go home and become a plumber or something like that back in America, or they could get into whatever these guys were doing, do what they do, and in Lance's case, do it even better, and you know, take that natural ability, add the chemical substances, and become even better. And their mentality, and I can totally imagine what this is like. Their mentality was, if everyone's doing it, we're doing it. That doesn't make it right. But when you read the accounts back, Tyler Hamilton's book, The Secret Race, is an amazing book. If you read that, you're gonna love it. Yeah, it's an amazing book. Floyd Landis wrote a book about it. Many accounts from different riders around that period, especially kind of around like 98, the Festina affair, 99, what was going on when Lance first won Lance's first world championship. You know, coming up against Miguel Indurain, who was the Spanish rider, who was a massive rider, who was just so powerful. And you know, beating him in Oslo to win the world championship, and then kind of like what happened after them was like 7 Tour de France victories, and they tunnel vision focused on winning the Tour de France, second American to win the Tour de France, and for me it was, yeah, I mean, probably of all the riders that could have got done and could have got banned, etc., Lance was probably Lance was probably thrown under a bus more than he should have because of the element of bullying, because this lie had got so big that he needed to continue to lie because so many people depended on it. And I can imagine what that's like. But for me back then as a kid watching the races, I was watching somebody who came back from beating cancer. Beating cancer, I say. There's no fight against cancer. From everybody that I've ever spoke to who's had cancer, you lay on a bed and you hope to God that cancer doesn't take you. That's how it is. Your ability to wake up in the morning, that's the only possible weapon you have against cancer. So it's not like it's a choice, yeah? So he's waking up, he's been lucky, had testicular cancer, and then built himself back. Now, there could be all sorts involved there, all sorts of drugs to get him back to top level. But there was a lot of people, I'm talking like 95% of people, who thought he would never ride a bike again competitively, let alone to go on to do whatever he did. So he had that story. He had that story that he was great, gone into the worst possible situation, like literally his body was eaten away by testicular cancer, and then he's building himself up again to try to become a Tour de France, and then it actually happened. And then he created the Livestrong Foundation, millions and millions towards people who are also in that same situation. And that maybe justified the lie. And that maybe helped him sleep at night. But in his head, I can imagine, and from whatever I see and read about him, he's a genuine character. He's a feisty little guy, and in his head, he wanted to build the fastest team ever. He was the boss, no matter whoever the sportif was. Him and Michele Ferrari worked on creating the fastest ever cyclist. And he came from not really a climber, a bit too heavy to be a climber, to be competing with Marco Pantani. And to see those duels up the Tourmalet and the big climbs and what actually happened there. And we saw what happened to Pantani. It was tragic. And Pantani I also really looked up to. And never, I don't think he ever failed. I think failed a test once and there was mafia involvement, etc. I don't know what happened. But then he had these duels against Jan Ulrich, and that made the Tour de France. It made it so exciting because we got to see characters, and this was before helmets were involved. So you wouldn't see the kind of helmet and the glasses, and the rider wouldn't be covered. So you'd have these epic battles in cycling, and you get to see this character, and you'd also get to see him take on journalists. When critics would try to say something about him, that this was ultramundo or impossible for a human to. So they're always implying that he was doping, and he was constantly backing up and defending this lie. For me, that was fascinating. For me, that was fascinating to see him not only win on the bike, but also take a journalist down. And I'm not saying that that's right. I remember this quote where he said to an Irish journalist, "You are not worth the chair that you are sat on," after a question like that. And he was all over the tabloids in different ways, and the tabloids are brutal. But his way of defending the lie and everything that he has since come out and talked about, that was an incredible thing to do at the time. And I looked up to that as well. Now, this might be right or wrong. I still don't know, but for me, it's like you get that choice, and this is the sliding door moment. You get that choice. You get to Europe, you realize you're 10, 20% off everybody else. What the hell is going on here? And you have a choice. Do you go back and do you become a plumber or electrician or something like that because you've not gone to university? You always wanted to be a cyclist. You know you're going to be a cyclist. And then you get to where it really counts in Europe, around France, Italy and Spain, and you're getting killed. You're not just getting killed, but all your team is getting killed and you're at the back of the pack all of a sudden. Crazy things are happening. So what do you do? What does a human being do in that situation? Do they get involved and get stuck in and actually kind of like do what everybody else is doing? And it was 95% of it was so much of the peloton, 180 plus riders were doping, that when a rider was publicly not doping, he was ostracized. That's how powerful it was back then. So then you ask yourself the question afterwards, was Lance Armstrong doing the wrong thing? Now, obviously, it gets to a point where it's not about who's the best athlete. It's definitely talent and natural ability with the best doctor. So it becomes who's got the most money to pay the best doctor on the planet in order to supercharge them. It becomes like Formula One. Who's got the best car, the best mechanics, the best car, the best engine. is the best doctor in cycling, or was the best doctor in cycling. So where ethically, morally, everything, you have to kind of question yourself. What would you do in that situation? I find it fascinating because I find sports psychology fascinating. But for me, if you kind of really have this chat, and I've had this chat with many runners, it's like, what do you do? It's like, okay, there's the purist inside of you that remembers yourself as, for me, growing up with East Cheshire Harriers, going there, having cheese sandwiches afterwards, having, you know, a hot Vimto, being with your coach and running and trying like to put some kind of training program together. You've got that. And then you try to take that somewhere and you realize everybody else is on a different playing field. Like, what do? And I really find that fascinating. If you have an opinion on that, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it. You know, this topic alone, Lance Armstrong alone, divides, yeah? And so for me, it was really important to look at as many cases as possible, read as many books around it, and see as much documentary and films and stuff like that, and as many people's interviews as possible to find out what Lance was really like. And, you know, a lot of people didn't like Lance. A lot of people, you know, say he was a bull. It's very, very similar to Michael Jordan. You have that winning mindset, that alpha male win at all cost. It's probably not going to be very, very nice to be around. Whether you're a teammate, you've got to be on the right side all the time. As soon as you step a foot and you go against him, like Tyler Hamilton did, again, you're ostracized. You're no longer getting access to those chemicals that you need in order to do really well. So you're ostracized, and then you've got to find your own team. And then guess what? The new team is not as well organized when it comes to the doctor like Tyler Hamilton's wasn't. And so you think you're competing, but you're on a different level, because although everybody might be doping, there are different levels to it. For me, it's fascinating. I hope you enjoyed it, and like and subscribe, and we'll talk more about sport, more about running, and have a great day.